The rain had been falling since dawn, tapping gently against the rusted gate of an old countryside house. A soft whimper echoed under the wooden porch. A golden Labrador, soaked through and shivering, curled up beside an empty food bowl. His fur, once bright and glossy, was dull and matted from the long days of waiting. His name was Marley. He didn't understand why the car had left that morning and never come back. He had chased it halfway down the lane, barking, his tail wagging, thinking it was another drive to the lake. But when the car disappeared beyond the hill and the wind carried no scent of his owner back, he had returned home, confused, hopeful, waiting. Every morning since, he sat by the gate. Every evening, he watched the road until the light faded and the first stars appeared. He still believed that one day, the sound of that familiar engine would return, that the door would open, and his human would call his name again. Days turned into weeks. The neighbors noticed him, but no one dared to move him from that spot. An old woman from across the road sometimes brought him scraps of bread and meat, and Marley would wag his tail politely but never leave his post. The woman would whisper, "Poor soul, you're still waiting, aren't you?" And he'd lower his head as if to say yes. One evening, as the wind howled and the rain grew heavy, Marley limped toward the porch, his paw bleeding from a sharp stone. He lay down, exhausted. The thunder rolled in the distance, but his eyes stayed on the road. His heart believed what his body no longer could, that love meant never leaving, even when the world forgot. The next morning, the storm had passed. The world smelled fresh and green. A small boy, no more than 10, rode past on his bicycle. He stopped when he saw Marley. The dog lifted his head weakly. The boy put down his bike and slowly approached. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, kneeling beside him. "You okay?" Marley wagged his tail just once, slow but certain. The boy smiled, gently touching his fur. "You're cold. Come on, you can't stay here." But when he tried to lead Marley away, the Labrador resisted, his eyes fixed on the empty road. The boy frowned, puzzled, then nodded. "Okay, I get it. You're waiting for someone." He came back that afternoon with his mother. She brought food, water, and a blanket. Marley ate slowly, then rested his head on her knee. The woman stroked him softly. "He's been here a while," she told her son. "Looks like he's lost someone." The boy whispered, "Can we help him?" She hesitated, glancing at the house, then nodded. "We'll see." Over the next few days, they returned every morning. Marley began to trust them. He'd wag his tail when he saw the boy's bike. Sometimes he'd follow them a little down the lane, but always turned back to sit by the gate before they reached the corner. The boy called him Buddy. Marley liked the sound of it. Winter began to creep in, and frost covered the ground. Marley's fur grew thinner, and his breath came out in clouds. The woman worried. "He won't make it through the snow," she said one morning, wrapping her scarf tighter. The boy looked at Marley, who sat trembling by the frozen gate. "He's waiting for someone who's never coming back." The words hung heavy in the air. That night, the temperature dropped below freezing. The wind howled through the valley. Marley curled tightly under the porch, shaking. He dreamed of a warm house, a voice calling his name, a gentle hand brushing his ears. He woke to footsteps crunching in the snow, the boy and his mother again. "Come on, boy," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "You can't stay here anymore." She wrapped a blanket around him, and this time, Marley didn't resist. His strength had faded. The boy smiled, whispering, "We'll take you home, buddy." They carried him into their car, the same kind of sound that once meant his owner was near. Marley's ears twitched. For the first time in months, he felt warmth again. The smell of people, the hum of an engine, the softness of a new beginning. At their home, they made a small bed by the fireplace. Marley lay down, sighing deeply. The boy placed a bowl of food beside him. "Eat up, buddy," he said, patting his head. Marley ate slowly, then rested. The fire's glow danced across his golden fur. That night, the boy fell asleep beside him, hand resting on Marley's paw. Outside, snow continued to fall, but inside, for the first time in a long time, Marley felt safe. He still looked toward the window now and then. Old habits never fade, but when he turned his gaze back to the sleeping boy, something in his heart began to heal. Days passed and Marley grew stronger. The boy took him for short walks around the garden. His tail started to wag more often. The woman smiled. "He's finally smiling again," she said. But sometimes, when the wind carried the faint echo of a car in the distance, Marley's ears would perk up, and his eyes would drift to the road. One afternoon, the boy noticed it. "You still think he'll come back, don't you?" he asked softly. Marley tilted his head, his eyes gentle, full of memories. The boy hugged him. "It's okay, buddy. You've got us now." The Labrador pressed his head against the boy's shoulder, and for a moment, he truly believed it. That night, as the moonlight shimmered across the frosted window, Marley lifted his head, listening to the quiet hum of a home that had accepted him. He sighed and closed his eyes. The waiting was over, though he still carried the love that once kept him by the gate. A love that now had found a new place to rest. The winter faded slowly, and the days began to stretch with soft sunlight spilling across the garden. Marley walked with a slight limp, but his spirit was stronger. Every morning, the boy, whose name was Oliver, would whistle softly, and Marley would come trotting across the yard, tail wagging, eyes shining. Oliver threw sticks that never went too far, knowing Marley's legs weren't what they once were. Still, the Labrador fetched every one, proud and joyful, like he was rediscovering what it meant to belong. The woman, Claire, watched from the porch, holding her cup of tea. "He's coming back to life," she said one morning, bit by bit. Marley's bed was now right by the fire, a spot he had claimed as his own. When Oliver came home from school, the dog would wait at the door, barking once, tail thumping against the wall. Oliver would drop his school bag and kneel, letting Marley nuzzle his cheek. It became their ritual, one that neither missed, not even once. But some nights Marley would wake suddenly, lifting his head as though hearing a sound only he could recognize. A faint car engine far away, or the whisper of a voice calling from the past. His eyes would drift toward the window, searching, remembering. Then, with a soft sigh, he would lower his head back down and fall asleep beside the fire. One Saturday morning, Oliver found an old leather collar in a box by the porch. It was worn and faded, the name tag barely legible. "Marley," he read aloud, smiling. Claire looked up from her gardening gloves. So that was his name. She knelt beside him and gently brushed the dust away. "Marley," she repeated, testing the word. The dog's ears perked up, and his tail began to wag furiously. Oliver laughed. "That's your name, isn't it, boy?" Marley barked once, as if to say yes. From that day on, Buddy became Marley again, and somehow, he seemed prouder, like the name carried memories he didn't want to lose. Spring came in full bloom. The garden filled with flowers, and the sound of birds returned. Marley followed Oliver everywhere, to the woods, the fields, even to the small stream that ran behind the village. Oliver would throw pebbles, and Marley would watch them splash, tilting his head curiously. Sometimes, he'd dip his paws in and bark at his own reflection. Their bond grew stronger with every passing day. Oliver's laughter returned to the house, and Claire often said, "You've both saved each other." But deep down, she worried. Marley was growing older. His muzzle was turning gray, and sometimes he'd pause mid-walk, his breathing heavy. One evening, as Oliver brushed his fur, he noticed the dog's eyes cloudier than before. "He's getting tired, Mom," he said quietly. Claire nodded, her smile gentle but sad. "He's had a long life, but he's happy now, that's what matters." Then came the day that changed everything again. It was a warm afternoon when Oliver ran through the meadow with Marley at his heels. They had played for hours, chasing and tumbling through tall grass. But on the way back, Marley suddenly stopped. His body stiffened. His legs trembled. Oliver turned and saw him collapse to the ground. "Marley!" he shouted, running back. The Labrador tried to get up but couldn't. His breathing was shallow. Oliver knelt beside him, tears filling his eyes. "It's okay, boy. It's okay." I'm here. Claire rushed out moments later. Together, they carried Marley into the car and drove to the village vet. The drive felt endless. Oliver held Marley's head in his lap, whispering, "Please don't go. Please don't go." At the clinic, the vet examined him gently. "He's very old," she said softly. "It's his heart." Oliver's voice broke. "Can you make him better?" The vet smiled sadly. "We'll do what we can, love." Marley stayed overnight for treatment. That night, the house felt unbearably quiet. Oliver couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring at the empty bed by the fire. "He has to come back," he whispered to himself. "He always comes back." The next morning, they returned to the clinic. Marley's tail thumped weakly when he saw them. He tried to stand, but the vet gently pressed him back down. "He needs rest," she said. Claire stroked his fur, and Oliver buried his face against his neck. "You're coming home, okay?" he whispered. Marley licked his hand, his eyes full of warmth and trust. They brought him home that afternoon. Claire laid a thick blanket by the fire. Marley sank into it, breathing softly, eyes half closed. Oliver stayed beside him all evening, telling him stories about school, about the friends he wanted Marley to meet once he was better. The dog's tail moved faintly with each word. Days passed, and Marley began to improve. He could walk short distances again. The first time he barked after the illness, Oliver cried from happiness. "See, Mum? He's not giving up." Summer arrived, warm and bright. The meadow turned golden again, and Marley was well enough to go for walks, though slower now. Oliver threw the ball gently, and Marley fetched it proudly, if only a few steps. They often sat together under the big oak tree, watching the sky turn pink at sunset. One evening, as fireflies danced above the grass, Oliver looked at him and said, "You waited for someone once, didn't you? You were all alone." Marley's eyes met his. The boy continued softly, "You don't have to wait anymore. You've got us." Marley nudged his hand and laid his head in his lap. For the first time, his eyes didn't drift toward the road. The weeks turned peaceful. Claire painted in the garden while Oliver and Marley played by the stream. It was the life the dog had never expected to find again. Quiet, safe, full of love. But time, as always, was quietly moving. One night, as rain pattered softly on the roof, Marley woke suddenly. He stood slowly, walked to the window, and looked out at the dark road beyond the gate. His reflection stared back, older, slower, but content. He turned away and walked back to his bed, where Oliver was sleeping soundly beside him. He lay down, sighing deeply, closing his eyes with the calmness of one who finally knew he was home. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains. Birds sang. Oliver stretched and smiled, reaching for Marley, but the dog didn't move. For a long moment he just stared, confusion turning to realization. "Marley?" he whispered, shaking him gently. The Labrador lay peaceful, eyes closed, face soft as if he was dreaming of something beautiful. Claire rushed in, froze, then knelt beside them. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Oliver pressed his forehead against Marley's. "You found your peace, didn't you?" he whispered, voice trembling. They buried him under the oak tree by the meadow, the place he loved most. Oliver placed his old leather collar on the wooden cross, whispering, "Thank you for waiting and for staying." That night, the house felt empty again. But in the stillness, Oliver swore he could hear a soft bark in the distance, a sound carried by the wind. He smiled through his tears. "Good night, Marley." The seasons rolled on, soft and steady. The meadow turned golden again, but now a small wooden cross stood beneath the oak tree. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers and the faint echo of laughter from far away. Oliver visited often, sitting quietly by the grave with a book or a sketchpad. Sometimes he talked softly, as if Marley could still hear him. Claire would watch from the porch, her heart heavy yet proud. She knew the boy had grown in ways that pain often teaches, gently, quietly, but deeply. Marley's leash still hung by the door, untouched. They couldn't bring themselves to move it. It felt wrong to erase him from the home he had filled with warmth. A year passed. Oliver was taller now, his voice deeper, but every morning, he still looked toward the spot by the fireplace before leaving for school. The empty space no longer made him sad. It reminded him that love doesn't fade when someone leaves. It simply changes shape. One afternoon, as he walked home through the village, he heard faint whimpers near an alley behind the bakery. He followed the sound and found a cardboard box tucked beside the bins. Inside were two tiny puppies, shivering, eyes barely open. One of them was golden, with floppy ears and a small scar above his nose. Oliver crouched, heart pounding. "Hey there, little ones," he whispered. The golden pup tilted his head, the same curious way Marley once had. Without thinking, Oliver reached out. The puppy licked his finger, trembling. He lifted them both gently into his arms and hurried home. Claire gasped when she saw him standing in the doorway, soaked from the rain, two small lives clutched to his chest. "Oh, Oliver," she murmured, covering her mouth. He set the box down by the fire and said softly, "They were all alone, Mum, just like Marley was." She knelt beside him, eyes glistening. "You've got your father's heart," she whispered. Then she fetched a towel and began drying the pups. The golden one nestled against Oliver's arm and refused to let go. "Looks like you've already been chosen," Claire said with a soft laugh. That night, the house came alive again. The patter of tiny paws, soft whimpers, the sound of laughter. Oliver built a little bed near the fireplace, in the exact same spot where Marley once slept. He watched the puppies curl into the blanket, their tiny chests rising and falling. "You're safe now," he whispered. "You're home." Days passed, and the golden pup followed him everywhere, tripping over his own paws, wagging his tail at everything, full of mischief and light. Oliver named him Charlie. Claire smiled. "It suits him," she said, "bright and full of life." Sometimes, when Charlie sat in the garden, he would stare toward the meadow, ears twitching as if he could sense something beyond the wind. Oliver noticed it too. "You feel him, don't you?" he whispered once. "He's watching over us." Charlie grew quickly, learning the same habits Marley once had. Waiting by the door when Oliver left, curling by the fire every night, wagging his tail when he heard laughter. There were moments when the boy swore he saw Marley's spirit flicker in the pup's eyes. That same gentle loyalty, that same unspoken love. One summer afternoon, Oliver walked with Charlie to the oak tree in the meadow. The grass swayed around them, and the sun poured through the leaves. He sat beside Marley's resting place, patting the ground next to him. Charlie lay down quietly, resting his head on Oliver's leg. "You know," Oliver said softly, tracing the letters carved into the wooden cross. "He waited for someone his whole life. I think he wanted to make sure I'd never have to wait like that." Charlie gave a small bark, lifting his head, and Oliver smiled. "Yeah," he whispered. "I think he'd like you." From that day on, visiting Marley's grave became their ritual. Oliver would bring Charlie, sit in the shade, and talk about his life, school, friends, dreams. The dog listened, his eyes full of the same gentle understanding that Marley once had. Years went by. Oliver grew into a young man, then a man with stories of his own. But no matter where life took him, he always returned home, to the small cottage, the meadow, and the oak tree. When Charlie grew old and gray, Oliver would sit beside him by the fire, just as he once did with Marley. The cycle of love continued quietly, faithfully, across the years. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and the air filled with the hum of summer, Oliver sat on the porch with Claire. Charlie lay at their feet dozing. The sky blushed pink, and the breeze carried the sound of distant birds. "He taught me so much," Oliver said suddenly. Claire looked at him, smiling faintly. "Marley," he nodded. "Yeah, about love, about waiting, about never giving up." Claire reached over, squeezing his hand. "He gave you a piece of himself, and you've passed it on." Oliver looked down at Charlie, whose eyes fluttered open briefly, tail wagging lazily. "I think he's still here," Oliver said quietly. In every heartbeat, every wag, every moment of kindness. The wind stirred through the tall grass, and for a second, Oliver could almost hear the faint bark of a dog in the distance. Strong, joyful, free. He smiled, eyes glistening. "Good boy," he whispered into the wind. "You can rest now." That night, as stars filled the sky, Oliver sat by the window, the fire casting warm light across the room. Charlie slept soundly beside him. On the mantelpiece sat a small framed photo, a golden Labrador with kind eyes and a heart too big for the world. Beneath it were the words, "Forever waiting, forever loved." Oliver closed his eyes, hearing in the stillness a sound he would never forget. The soft padding of paws, a familiar breath, a loyal spirit that had never truly left. And somewhere beyond the veil of time, under the eternal oak tree, two Labradors ran together through endless fields, free, happy, and finally home.